Okay, we're on.
Hey, great.
Okay, today is April 13th in the year 2013. I'm Karen
Wow.
Herman with the Archive of American Television, and it is my pleasure today to be interviewing Sam Simon.
Hey,
So
Karen.
let's start right from the beginning, Sam. What was your name at birth?
My name at birth was Samuel Michael Simon.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Los Angeles, California on June 6th, 1955,
Is that-
which hopefully will be a holiday one day. And I grew up in Beverly Hills, California, and I like to say that I'm just a kid from Beverly Hills that got lucky.
Well, talk a little about your family life, your parents, and what they did.
My mother was a Beverly Hills housewife, and my father had a schmata factory in downtown Los Angeles. That's the rag. The schmata is Yiddish for rags. He made women's sportswear for Sears and J.C. Penney, and they would have spies at whatever passed for Fashion Week back then, and they would sketch down the designs, and then overnight they had to have samples of cheap versions of what the designers were showing, and then my father would make a whole bunch of those and send them to department stores.
What were your
It
parents'
sounds shady, but it wasn't. That's like what the business was.
What were your parents' names?
My father's name was Arthur Sheldon Simon, and my mother's name was Joan DeVita Feld.
What traits do you think you inherited from them?
Let's see. What did I inherit from? Well, my mother had kind of a bad temper, so I think maybe I got that from her. I, of course, have conquered that, but she never did. And then my father had kind of a dry sense of humor, not my sense of humor, but I think maybe I got that from him.
Do you have any siblings?
I have a sister.
Was there a lot of humor in your household?
It wasn't the happiest, laughingest. It wasn't a laughing place.
And growing up, did you have were there a lot of kids that you knew that were kids of the people in the business?
Well, I grew up in Beverly Hills, and we certainly had neighbors that were in show business. I remember when I was 5 years old, I walked in on Groucho Marx and my mother in a compromising position in my parents' bedroom. And they were clothed, but it was clearly inappropriate that that a child was there, and it made them very uncomfortable. And I remember listening outside the door before I went in, and I remember the conversation between Groucho and my mother, and Groucho said, he said, "Oh, Mrs. Simon, will you marry me? Are you rich? Answer the second question first." And my mother was shocked. She said, "Why, that is so impertinent." And he said, "Don't wait, don't leave in a huff, leave in a minute and a huff." And she calmed down for a second, and he said, "I'd love to have a lock of your hair." And she said, "Groucho, I didn't know you felt..." No, that part didn't happen. That's Margaret Dumont, who was not like my mother. But the part in the bedroom did happen. And another time, my dog ran away, and Elvis Presley brought him back in a limousine. So these are little glimpses into what it was like to grow up in Beverly Hills in the 60s. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like that. No, but it was kind of like the way you would have seen on the Jack Benny show or the Lucy show. Well, wait, no, she didn't live in Beverly Hills in her show, but she lived in Beverly Hills in real life with with Gary, whatever it is,
Gary Morton.
Gary Morton, in a big house, and they had all celebrity neighbors there. But growing up in Beverly Hills, Fraser Heston was a friend of mine. He was Charlton Heston's son, and he went on to become a bit of a filmmaker. And I remember Charlton Heston, he introduced me to Yakima Canutt. He said, "Sam, this is Yak Canutt. He's the greatest stuntman in the business." And I remember he said, "I'm doing a movie where the apes are people and the people are apes." And I was like, okay. I was probably like 11 years old. I thought that sounded good. But the people that I'm trying to think, because my friends, we used to make little movies, and we used to make our own comic books, and I don't think anybody did it professionally that I can think of, except for me.
What were your interests growing up?
I became interested in sports, but I like comic books, I like movies, I like television, and then, of course, art. I was an art prodigy when I was a child. They used to put me on TV shows, and they would read stories, and I would draw them very quickly. I would draw large illustrations of them for, I don't know, maybe that'll come back as entertainment. Maybe it'll get its own cable channel, kids drawing.
Was it like a local show?
Yeah, these would be local talk shows and stuff.
What was your style as a kid drawing?
Oh, at that age? No. I mean, probably like cartoon, they would look like cartoon characters probably, but I'm talking about when I was 7 and 8 years old, so I didn't really develop a style yet. Although I did develop a style. I never went to art school, and that turned out to be a good thing, because I ended up drawing the way I would draw something. Getting a little influence here, seeing stuff that I like in other people, but people that tend to go to more rigid academic schools, especially in animation, they do all draw like each other, and that's not necessarily a good thing, especially at the design stage of a show.
Did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was destined to be a lawyer, and the proposition got so daunting to me and started to sound so horrible to me when I was in college, because I couldn't stay in college, that I was, at the same time, while I was at Stanford, I was a cartoonist for the San Francisco Examiner, San Francisco Chronicle, the Palo Alto Times, and the student newspapers. So I decided to become a syndicated cartoonist, because in the old days, they used to have a thing called comic strips and a thing called a newspaper that everybody would buy every day. And there were actually 2 pages at least of them, and every day people would see what happened to Snoopy, who was a beagle that belonged to a little boy named Charlie Brown, or they had cavemen named BC, and I heard that you could make a lot of money doing that, and it just seemed like a pretty sweet gig that I would be good at. And I put together a submission for the syndicates, and they're very hard to sell in reality. They used to get something like 1,000 submissions and would only launch 1 or 2 a year. And mine was actually test marketed, so it came kind of close, and they said, well, you should stick with it, you should give us something else next year. But my submission was seen by a guy named Lou Scheimer, who was the founder of Filmation Studios, which frankly is about one of the worst animation studios ever. They were very low rent, they did everything on the cheap, and he hired me to be a character designer, storyboard artist, and writer at the studio because he saw what I was doing. And again, it was just, he saw the way I drew, and, you know, he said, I got 150 guys here, but nobody does this. So I designed a bunch of the new characters, and then I wrote scripts for, people say like, well, what shows did you write for? And I go, well, Heckle and Jekyll and Mighty Mouse. And they go, oh, you know, that's great. And I go, no, this was the new adventures of Heckle and Jekyll. This was the new adventures of Mighty Mouse. They didn't sing, they didn't have good, these were awful. And really the writing, half the writing on those shows was, you had books of stock footage, and you had to figure out how to make the show 40% stock footage. So you'd get your idea for a story, and you go, well, they can run and then, you know, abruptly stop with dust coming up behind them. We could use this, okay, and then you know, but the main thing that struck me as to what made the shows bad was that they recorded all the actors separately, and they had no interest in trying to find anything in the material, or just, it was really a sausage factory. Not a sausage, is that what they call? I thought a sausage factory is like a party with all guys. It's a, what do they call? I don't know. It was quite a, it was a cheap factory. And even at my tender age of 21, I thought, you know, this would be much better if the people could look at each other and hear what the other person said and then say their lines. That would make this a lot better. And so when it came time to figure out how to do The Simpsons, many years later, that was certainly one of the things that I insisted on, is that we recorded it as if it were a live radio performance, and all the cast were there doing their parts.
One of the credits from the Filmation era was Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids.
Oh, well, that's the only good one, to be honest. There's a lot of affection for that show, and I'll say that was something different. That was the, I mean, look, it is Fat Albert, and if you watched it now, you know, but that was the flagship of the company, and it was, I did write one of those. I also designed, you know, they only made 1 or 2 new ones a year, and they just would air all of them because, you know, they thought like, well, our target audience is just getting old enough to watch them, so they said we don't really have to make so many new ones all the time, but they would make a couple new ones a year, and they would try to repurpose them and you know, get some more mileage out of them. So Bill Cosby, I guess he remembered listening to the Green Hornet, which dates Bill Cosby, on the radio. And he said, what if the kids are listening to a show called The Brown Hornet, and it's something that they talk about during the show, and maybe the lesson of because that was a heavy lesson show, maybe the lesson of the show has to do with something that the Brown Hornet and Tweeter experienced, and so says, okay, so they had me design, so those characters, when you see them, were designed by yours truly, and I was directing a Drew Carey show probably 25 years later, and I guess kids of P. Diddy's age and Jay-Z's age, they kind of remember Fat Albert fondly, and Sean John had a line of clothing which were, I don't want to say extremely expensive, but $1,500, $2,000 leather jackets that they did product placement and put them on our set, and they had the character designs from Fat Albert embroidered on the back, and one of them was a big brown hornet and tweeter, which was something I designed. So it was really weird to see something that I drew 25 years ago that I would never, I never thought I would see too much of it again on this very contemporary item on a set of a show that I was directing.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Did you get a chance to work with Bill Cosby himself?
I got to go to the set a couple times when he was working. I was a kid, so they let me yell action and cut, which I don't know. To me, if I were Bill Cosby, I think at that point in his career, he could accept that. I don't think he would tolerate it now, and I don't think he should. I thought it was inappropriate. I would certainly never let anybody do that on my set, but that was director Arthur Nadel who gave me that honor. I did talk to him a few times after they moved The Simpsons opposite The Cosby Show, and I'm not sure whether he knew I worked on Fat Albert, and I'm not sure why he chose to call me of the three executive producers, and I'm certainly not sure what he was talking about whenever I would listen to him. But I know, what was the name of the littlest Cosby girl? Rudy? Rudy. I know that when it was announced that The Simpsons was going to be on against The Cosby Show, I got a call from Bill Cosby, and the headline was that Rudy was not going to have an abortion. And he was, but Rudy not going to have an abortion. And it was like, and I, and I'm just, I think what he meant was he's not changing his show, and they're not going to do stunt shows, but it wasn't a good example.
So how long were you at Filmation?
Oh, less than a year.
And then what did you do afterwards? Why did you leave?
I left because I was writing, and it was very frustrating, and I thought, well, as long as I'm a writer, I should write a show that I liked. And a show that I liked at the time was Taxi, and so I wrote a spec script for Taxi, and I mailed it in, and they bought it, and they made it into a show. How often does that happen?
You just mailed it. Who did you mail it to?
I think the Charles Brothers.
And talk about that episode that you wrote.
It was an episode where Tony gets his boxing license taken away, which I think if you get knocked out as many times as he did on that show. Now, Tony Danza was a good boxer. His character, Tony Banta, was a bad boxer. But it just seemed like a natural, it seemed like, sometimes there's stuff that you get away with on the show, and you eventually you got to deal with it. I mean, they got a guy how long did you last night, Tony? He's like, well, 10 seconds, because I tripped coming in. I don't know, and then it's like, I mean, he clearly has this danger of, if not what we now know as brain damage.
So talk about that. Did they just call you and say, we're going to do it? How did that all happen? Because it
Yeah.
is so rare.
And they I went in for notes on the script, and a couple of scenes didn't change. A couple of scenes didn't change the whole time. But I just remember I thought they were making it better every time. I never had that ego about my material. I just thought, oh, this is really funny. Oh, this is really good. Oh, this is a really good idea. And I just liked those guys right off the bat. And I liked watching them work. If you've never seen like real pro comedy writers and just the badinage, and they each have a little, there's role playing and there's stuff. I just thought that was, it was really cool. I remember I finished my first rewrite before I got home. I was so excited, I kept pulling over and doing, and scribbling on the script and stuff. So I had pretty much finished my first draft by the time I got back to my house. My brain was working 1,000 miles an hour.
Were you there when they filmed it?
Yes, I was. Are you asking that because there's a tale associated with it?
Is there?
What?
Is there?
Yeah, there is. It's actually the reason Jeff Conaway got fired from Taxi was that the night they shot my first episode, they invited the writer, as they, as you usually do, and I was supposed to sit in the stands. I got there a little early, and these guys, they came off the stage, and the writer-producers were clearly in a panic. And I was like, well, what's going on? And Ken Esten told me, okay, Jeff Conaway has been missing all day. It turned out he was locked in his dressing room on a cocaine binge. Tony Danza knocked down the door after dress rehearsal, and Jeff is in no condition to do the show. So between now and the start of the show, we have to write Jeff Conaway out of the episode. And I'm like, oh my God, this is, well, I guess I regret admitting, I thought, why did this happen to me instead of poor Jeff Conaway? But that was my first thought, because it sounded like it was going to ruin the show. And then it turns out, like 15 minutes later, they walk out and they go, that was pretty easy. They kind of figured out, like any joke that Jeff had, it was funny, or if Reverend Jim did it, or Tony did it. Didn't really have a character, like, except when he was talking about acting. So the idea of bringing him back the next year, it just became like, look, guys, we don't need this guy. So that was the first episode of Taxi of mine that was shot.
Now, what attracted you to even writing a spec script for it?
I just thought as long as I was writing, I should write a show that I liked, and I liked that show. I'm not, I probably watch a lot of TV. I don't watch a lot of sitcoms. I love Larry David's show. I will watch Big Bang Theory because I think Jim Parsons is hilarious. I don't know if there's another half-hour show that I watch. But I watch Game of Thrones, the Aaron Sorkin show, the
Newsroom?
Newsroom. I thought, I bet this year it's going to be fantastic. Um, I watch some of the Real Housewives. I watch, I watch the stuff, but the half-hour shows, really, there's just a few of them that I've ever really liked, and I've really liked those.
Okay, so you wrote your first script for Taxi.
Yes.
They produced it.
Yes.
How then did you get on staff?
Well, they just grabbed me in 2 seconds. Like the second I turned it in, they put me on staff.
What do you think they saw in you?
Well, it's interesting. I work on anger management, and things have changed, but that was also, there weren't a lot of places like John Charles Walters Productions, which was the Taxi production company, or Charles Burroughs Charles, which did Cheers. Because someone was saying at Anger Management, you know what I miss? I miss the way we used to haze the young writers. And I'm like, excuse me? Like hazing, right? Because these were writers' companies. We didn't have big staffs. We had 2 or 3 people on staff, and we had freelance writers, and we certainly had great executive producers that we could go to if we needed help. But it wasn't this bullshit with 15 people sitting around a giant conference table where, yeah, maybe you can make fun of them, but we were treated like jewels. So that was when you say, like, the idea that someone could be doing this at this level that doesn't have a lot of training and is very young, I just intuitively seem to get how to do it, and they realized it right away, because I was running the show a year later.
Well, talk about that. How did that happen?
There was just nobody else that was going to do it besides me and Ken Eston, so they let us do it.
Talk about the writing process itself for the show. Were there rules? What was the, how, like a week in your life at that point?
Well, we would write our own scripts. At the same time, we were working on the show in production. And that seems to be impossible to do today. I don't know why. We would meet and beat out, a bunch of different shows at the beginning of the season. Taxi was a little different in that there wasn't like an overall arc for the season, but there had to be 5 Jim stories and 6 Louis stories and 7 Alex stories, and everybody had to get their turns in the barrel, as we used to say. And part of the process was always running the story by Jim Brooks whenever we could grab him. And it was frequently by his Mercedes, while he was on his way to, some terms of endearment shoot. And those moments were, because he can talk faster than, he could write scenes faster than the actors could perform them. And it was just a matter of scribbling all this stuff down. So, while we, maybe at the time some of our stuff was a little pedestrian, but 15 minutes with Jim could elevate what we're doing to, the level of that show.
Do you have an example of that?
you know, there's so many examples of just important speeches and dialogue. That episode you're talking about, you know, that didn't have an ending.
Which episode?
The Schlugel
Oh, the Schlugel
episode. Boy, it's funny. The thing that I remember is like when we got better at it, he would go like, "I don't want to do this," and we go, "No, no, no, we're not going to do that." And he'd go, "Oh, okay, okay, okay." So like, I remember like him approving of what we did rather than going, "No, no, no, it's got to be more like this." But maybe something will come to me later.
Okay. What about the comedy of the show itself? Right
Well, the
here.
comedy of the show itself was a problem for the show itself because it was so many different styles of comedy. There was a traditional, you know, immigrant that didn't speak English, and there was a lot of drug stuff with Iggy. It was vulgar with Louie, and Alex was this sensitive, introspective guy, and so the tone of the show was could be very different from week to week. And whereas, look, now if that show, and I'm not saying the show would get the numbers that it got if it were on the air now. Of course it wouldn't, but a lot of people did like it, just not enough for it to be a hit in 1980, whatever.
Did you have a lot of dealings with the actors themselves?
Yeah. Like, one of the things was like every writer could talk to every actor without approving what your note was, and they respected us. The show I work on now, there's like, it's the writers and the actor, like they're rival gangs, and I think that's a pretty common thing, and it's like, the Jews or the writers are coming down with their jokes, and there's a very negative stereotype about writers is these guys that look at, we weren't, and I should say, we were not allowed to look at our scripts during a run-through. I find that incredibly disrespectful of the actors, that there's human beings that are using their faces and bodies and voices to perform something that you wrote, and instead of watching them, I don't know if people know, have you seen what it's like on a sitcom? And these guys sit there like this. They're just trying to make sure they don't get a word wrong or something. And I used to put in material on the, shtick on the Drew Carey show, and then I would go back to I could go to the rewrites too, and I go, "Are you going to change this line?" And they go, "No, that got a big laugh." And I go, "It did not get a laugh at all. What got a laugh was that I had something going on in the back, but they wouldn't even realize it because they weren't watching the run through."
But it wasn't like that on Taxi?
No, I was told not to. I was told literally, put that down, watch the actors. By Ed Weinberger.
Well, talk about, there's so
Put
many...
that down. Why don't you watch the fucking actors?
Did a lot of the stories that you wrote come from your own life?
No, I don't think that show was like that. I think we related to things a little bit the way we do our own life, but with some notable exceptions. I think people were mainly trying to think up stories for these characters. Like the Andy Kaufman stuff was very broad. That never happened to anybody.
What was it like working with him?
I think there's a complete charade about what it was like. He always had said he was Tony Clifton. He was never out of control. He was completely reasonable as far as I'm concerned about everything. I think that there's a guy named Bob Zamuda who makes money by perpetuating that aspect of, you know, like maybe he would go a little further with a practical joke, but he wasn't like that at all. I actually thought he was really professional because his deal, and the deal they gave him was that he had, you know, that unless he was heavy in the episode, he only had to come in 2 days a week, and that's all he needed. You know, he would come in before the show. He would look at the script. They'd tell him what his blocking is, and that's a lot. When I say he looked at the script, he didn't memorize it because he was talking nonsense talk most of the time anyway. But he got close enough, you know, and was quite a character. But that Man in the Moon stuff, I just don't buy it. That's not my experience. I remember him saying, have Tony Clifton back. He'll be good this time. And I remember him saying, you know, and then he took off he was wrestling and supposedly had some wrestling injury and wanted Latka to have the same injury because Andy had been injured. And we said, absolutely not. Because we had looked at it, you know, his injury came in a very traditional wrestling move that, you know, you don't get hurt in if you know how to do it. So we said no. He said, all right, can't blame the guy for trying. So that's the real Andy Kaufman.
How about the rest of the cast? Judd Hirsch?
Well, I loved them. You know, I had an enormous amount of respect for them. It was my first show. They were respectful of the writers. So I don't have a bad word to say about any of them. And I think that, you know, this idea that Shelley Long maybe is difficult, but she wasn't that difficult when Cheers started. And I am the biggest fan in the world of the Charles Brothers and Jim Burrows, but I think they were spoiled a little by how great and easygoing the Taxi cast was. And part of that was we used to do big rewrites. They might perform a whole act of material that they never performed before when the audience came in. So they were game, you know. They were like a football team. They were the guys you wanted to go to battle with, and Shelley was a little fussy, and things had to be more precise. And she, you know, and I'm not. Believe me, you know, it's a little bit of an issue, but she's also was great, and a lot of her reputation, I think, came out of the contrast between her and the cast of Taxi, who would never pull any shit like that.
Talk about some of the episodes themselves. Do you have any favorites of Taxi?
You know, it's so long ago. I haven't seen them, and I know there's one with Louis and Andrea Marcovici I really liked.
Is it the Louis' Revenge?
Was it Louis' Revenge or was it Louis'? Well, there were two of them. We did a sequel one. There's one where he cheated on her.
Yeah, that's...
And then there's one where he got... Where's the one where she sang It Had to Be You in it? Well, I mean, I like both of those. I like the Schlugel show.
How did that come about, that one?
We wanted to do Love American Style, which I think is in I think the theme song is in, or maybe it's not in syndication, but the act break was we played the Love American Style theme over cuts and I'm trying to think like what other, There were a lot of really good ones. And the fifth season was, that was us without Jim as much. And I got to say, it was uneven, but there was a lot of really good shows that year. The gambling show was really good, I remember. Some great jokes in it. When did they burn down Louis' apartment?
That wasn't the last episode. That wasn't the last season.
That wasn't last season? That was a good show. I don't know. The weird thing about Taxi, and I think that maybe it's because the tone of the shows were so different and the characters were so different. Like even episodes that I don't think were very good, people have said that's their favorite episode. And this hasn't happened recently. But when the show was Au Courant, people go, "Oh my God, you know what my favorite one is?" And I go, "I have absolutely no idea, because everyone is somebody's favorite episode." And then you'd hear, "What? The one where Alex's dog dies?" Oh, the Christmas show I thought was really funny. I really liked that with Louise Lasser. I thought there were a bunch of great shows.
How did you, because there were a lot of sad moments in the show, which was
I
very
know.
unusual for a sitcom. How did you balance that all out?
I just thought that was the show, and I don't see why. I think is that there were like real feelings that we were talking about and vulnerabilities, and I don't see why. I don't see why it's eliminated today. I mean, from Charlie Chaplin, comedy has had a little of that pathos, or bathos, or bathos, but The Simpsons had it. There were some really sad things on The Simpsons. And that was a cartoon show. Those weren't even real people, like on Taxi. There weren't real people on Taxi.
Did it affect you too when the show moved from ABC to NBC? Did anything have to change for that?
Nothing had to change. They didn't want. They were very worried about Reverend Jim, and Ken and I went in and explained to Brandon Tartikoff that Reverend Jim is a casualty of drugs, which is true. It wasn't even like a bullshit argument. It was like, well, no, he's and I don't think he took drugs during the show. I don't think that was part of it. He was just he just had brain damage. So that made it good.
And you mentioned Ken Eston. Now, was he your writing partner? How did that relationship work?
We were producing partners the last season of the show, and we always wrote separately, but if we needed a script quickly, we would write together, because you write faster when you write together.
And how long did that partnership last? Did it just last through Taxi, or?
Taxi, and we did the same thing on Cheers. On Cheers, we wrote our own scripts, and then we also would write some together.
What did you do when Taxi went off the air?
What did I do when Taxi went off there? Oh, Ken and I did a show called Shaping Up.
What was that?
It was set in a gym. It was Leslie Nielsen playing Jack LaLanne, Jennifer Tilly was an aerobics instructor. Tim Robbins was the manager of the gym. The network made us fire him. And it was a hit. And it just got canceled, which has happened a few times to me. And I can't complain, because I've certainly, gotten the benefit of not the benefit of the doubt, but the benefit of the system on numerous occasions. But, when they sour on something, or they change a regime, or this or that, I mean, I think we were I think we were a top 10 show the week we were canceled. We only had like a 7-episode order.
And
So
from
that's
there,
what we did.
from there you went to Cheers?
Yeah, and then we went to Cheers.
And at what point in Cheers did you start?
Well, we worked on the first episode and wrote scripts for the first 2 seasons, and then we ran the show 3rd year.
Can you talk about the development of the show? What you did for that first script? What was there? What you added to that?
Oh, we didn't do anything. I think, no, no, the Charles Brothers had that perfectly under control. There were changes that they made. I mean, Sam was supposed to be a football player, and Ted looked more like a baseball player. I think Ratzenberger was supposed to be a policeman, and then he became a mailman. Trying to think, but just stuff like that. They knew what they wanted, and they knew what they were doing. They're the great. I mean, if I could be in a room and anyone in the world was running the room, it would be Les Charles. It just, I don't know how the stuff got. It just seemed like we were all having fun and making jokes, and he was whispering stuff to a writer's assistant, and then at the end of the night at a reasonable hour, there were 42 pages of a good script. That's what it's like working with Les Charles.
How was it when you were running the show, you and Ken?
Well, like by the time of The Simpsons, I liked it. I would rather, it's like, for me, it depends on how good your staff is. And certainly on The Simpsons, it was a dream staff. I've probably been on 2 or 3. No, Taxi, Cheers, The Simpsons, just where everybody's great, everybody can have the idea, everybody's in sync, all positive energy, which is something that shows seem to struggle with now, is that just there's people in the room going, I don't understand, what are we doing? You just go like, what are we doing? No, I'll tell you what they say. They go, I don't know what I'm watching. You go, you don't know what we really have done bad work. You don't know what you're watching. That's a pretty damning critique of that makes me feel horrible. But they do it to, like it's a coup de grace. It's like they do it to completely sabotage an idea that they don't like, and it's very effective.
Going back to Cheers, what made it work so well?
Chemistry between Ted Danson and Shelley Long. Now, I'm not saying the show wouldn't have been a hit, but what made it work so well is that there's this lightning in the bottle, this je ne sais quoi, there's this thing called chemistry, and you can't plan for it, it just hits, and those 2 people had it, and you can't stop watching it when you get it. They just had it. And it wasn't supposed to be the Sam and Diane show, but Glenn and Les Charles and Jimmy Burrows are all really smart, great TV producers, and they said, let's make this show about these 2, meaning, like a lot of weeks it's just like whatever, there's some little league team, whatever the hijinks that were going on, it would end with Sam and Diane talking about what happened, and and flirting a little bit, and going. So, so no question, what made that show pop was there was also there's a character that was there was another regular that was cut out of the pilot. Did you know that? Have you talked to anybody? There was a racist old. Boston is a very racist town, and there was an old woman in a wheelchair whose name I don't remember, but I think you can see her in the pilot, in the first episode, I should say, because it wasn't a pilot. but they wanted to do like the reality of Boston a little bit, and the racism of the town is certainly a valid topic for comedy.
Was it difficult thinking up stories for Cheers?
I don't, I don't know, no.
And were you there when Shelley Long actually left?
No.
Okay. What do you think is the legacy of that series?
The legacy of Cheers? Well, I think the longevity of the show. I think how it kept getting better when it would lose people. Like, to lose Shelley Long, but get Kirstie Alley. To lose Nick Colasanto, but get Woody Harrelson. This isn't really supposed to happen. You know, I don't think you can name another show where such strong people came in to take over, including when Peter Casey and David Lee and David Angel took over running the show. You know, I think the incredible longevity, like if you take Frasier and Cheers, you're talking about almost 20 years of a show. The only show that lasted longer than that is The Simpsons. But smart show. The thing that I like about it, and again, you know, I never wanted to be grandpa in the room, so I don't pitch this stuff, but I love that you could watch, you know, now, if there's not 3 jokes, and they have check marks on the pages of how many jokes are on each page, someone goes, we need more jokes on this page. And I just don't buy it. I don't think the audience gives a shit about it. And I don't think it's good writing. And I just go, you know, I know there's a lot of stuff that's dated. I know there's a lot of things that you can't really do anymore. But I do think that Sam and Diane going at it for 3 pages where it's subtext and the audience is and they know there's going to be a payoff. I think that's great TV, and I don't see a reason why it wouldn't work. But no one does it anymore. But that's a hallmark of Cheers.
Now, you left it in 1985.
That was a long time ago.
Why did you leave?
I think I wanted to write movies. But I didn't, so.
And then your next stop then was the Gary Shandling show.
Oh, well, I was just consulting on those shows. Like, whenever I'm not really working, I do like a day a week on shows like Gary Shandling's show. I think I did, was I consulting on Tracy Ullman's show too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll talk a little about the Gary Shandling show. What that was like for you as a consultant.
It was the craziest, worst run show I've ever, you know, it was just insane, but it was really funny, and Gary's really talented. It's the longest hours of anything I've ever been associated with. Like, we wouldn't get notes till midnight sometimes, by the time people could tear themselves away from whatever they were doing inside their offices. I met Tom Gamble and Max Pross, who were very influential for me. They work on The Simpsons now. They worked on Seinfeld, and they're very funny. When it was fun because it was so wide open, and it was kind of a parody of sitcoms, It's Gary Shandling's show. But it was very frustrating and not the most fun place to work.
Do you know what made it that? Was it?
Yeah, Gary Shandling announced my bell.
Were they hard to work with, or it's too much pressure?
Well, Gary at least is funny, but there's just a lot of game playing and a lot of, I know, I don't know how, what is the time capsule? How does that go?
Oh, if you want to say something, just you can just say, "Let's time capsule. Let's start here." And
Who has to die before it comes out of the time capsule?
you tell us when.
What? No, you can leave this in.
Okay.
Do you know what Q scores are? What does it measure?
It basically measures the popularity of.
The likability, I think, is what it measures. And basically, it's, would you want to have dinner with your family and this person? That's called your Q score. And when the Gary Shandling show, it briefly got picked up by Fox. And Gary goes, his expectation was that we were going to be the #1 show on the Fox network. And, and it was his right to have this. It was, it's just like, oh, and then we're going to take over that place. And, well, it turns out the Gary Shandling show didn't do very well on the Fox network. And I think a lot of people knew why. That Gary is a little too New York, you might say, a little too whiny, a little the same reason that Larry David is great on HBO, but maybe then America doesn't want to see too much of that. Well, they had to get to the bottom of this. And so they tested, at the time there were 127 network leads, and they tested their Q rating, their Q score, which measures, would you like to have dinner with this person? Gary was 125. 124 was the cackling skull from HBO's Tales from the Crypt.
No way, really?
Yeah, Gary finished behind the ghoul from Tales from the Crypt. So if you said, would we rather our kids have dinner with the Crypt Keeper or Gary Shandling? Most American families would pick the Crypt Keeper. So maybe that's the reason. Maybe that's the reason that people get a sense of what you're like. They get your essence comes out over the TV. How long have we been talking?
Almost an hour.
Almost an hour?
As a matter of fact, let's stop and change the tape.
Oh.